look, if LSU turns it around, beats A&M on the road, right here in my backyard, goes in Death Valley, gets Alabama, night game, beats them in Death Valley, and we look and LSU's a playoff team and they've turned it around, Brian Kelly's going to go to the presser, I guarantee you, and say, this game against Ole Miss, this was when we figured ourselves out. This was an identity-shifting game for LSU. Because if you remember, last year, LSU gave up 55 points and 700 yards to Ole Miss. No, that is not fake. 700 yards. LSU had a generational Heisman quarterback. I'll say it at this point because of how he looks at the Commanders and the stats that he put up last year and managed to go 9-3. There's only one reason why they went 9-3, and that is their secondary just imploded. So what did Brian Kelly do? He said, hogwash with that. We're bringing in Blake Baker from Missouri. We're making him the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football, folks. And what did LSU do? It wasn't pretty. Nussmeier completed under 50% of his passes, but they sacked Jackson Dart 6 times and gave up under 4 yards a carry, 23 points in regulation to Ole Miss after giving up 55. Look, that's a win. And this defense isn't perfect. They're not the 1985 Chicago Bears. Let me say that. But, with that being said, I picked Ole Miss because I thought that Ole Miss's defense could be good enough, and I didn't think LSU's defense could be good enough. That's why I picked Ole Miss. I was wrong. Humbly admitting, I was wrong because LSU's defense was good enough. Not only were they good enough, they had a spectacular performance. Absolutely. And now, let's talk about this because if you're LSU, we're zoning into the past and we're looking on to the future and we're looking ahead and your expectations shift because this LSU Ole Miss game, I called it last week a playoff elimination game. Whoever loses this game is going to have an under 10% chance to reach the college football playoff. Highly unlikely. A lot would have to go their way. LSU is looking at green pastures now because but before I officially announce them, this destined for playoff team, we've got to look at this stretch ahead at Arkansas, at Texas A&M, Alabama. If they can go 2-1 in those 3 games, we're probably looking at a 10-2 LSU team because you have in the season with Florida at Florida, Vanderbilt. Hey, that's not an easy win, but Oklahoma. That 3-game stretch next week at Arkansas, that's a night game on ABC. That LSU-Arkansas rivalry goes back all the way to 93 when Arkansas joined the SEC. They've played year in year. Those teams, there's some bad blood there. That's going to be a big game. Will Taylor Green be healthy? That's going to be a serious question to monitor at Texas A&M right here in Alabama. If they can go 2-1, playoff bound. If LSU goes 1-2 in that stretch, not sure 9-3 is going to cut it. I'm not sure 9-3 is going to cut it. But, there was a bunch of hype going into this game for LSU, and a lot of players described it. Brian Kelly described it as the best practice his defense had. So, hey, LSU looks to be figuring themselves out a little bit. They really do. If you're Ole Miss, man, this is soul-crushing. This is legitimately soul-crushing. I really felt for Ole Miss fans because, Ole Miss isn't necessarily Alabama or Oklahoma. You may not find yourself in this situation every year. And Kiffin said it. He said it himself. He said, this one is going to stick with me probably forever. And I don't blame him because it's just a hard way to lose. Ole Miss had them. They were winning by a touchdown with minutes to go and gave up a big 3rd and 18 touchdown. But now if you're Ole Miss, man, first off, the offensive line questions need to be addressed because against Kentucky and against LSU, Dart has been sacked a combined 10 times. The running game has not been near what it was a couple last year. It really hasn't. Since SEC play, I came in the preseason with Ole Miss and I said, okay, there's this tier, right? You have Georgia, Texas, and I put Alabama on that tier, but no, that's TBD. And then you have a tier below that, and that's Ole Miss, potentially Tennessee, others. And what A&M, what does Ole Miss have to do to get to tier 1? Well, the answer is their offensive line. If they don't get beat up in the trenches, you can be as good as you possibly can on the outside. But if you get beat up in the trenches in the SEC, you're not going to go places. And Ole Miss, despite being power rated in my model as high as second and third, numbers will spit a certain thing at you. But if you're getting beat up in the inside, man, numbers or not, that's just something it's hard to overcome. And we saw that against LSU. Ole Miss is in survival mode now. You have to win out. Under zero circumstance can you make the playoff at 9-3 with the non-conference schedule that they have. They have to beat Georgia. There is no what if. There is no if this. Nope. You have to beat Georgia. Ole Miss has to win every single game. And that's hard. That's really hard. I think they are capable. With how Georgia has looked, how they struggled against Kentucky, I think they're capable. Not going to sit here and say it's likely. Unfortunate for Ole Miss. Kiffin did have a quote that blew up that I want to talk about. He said, quote, "I'm glad Ole Miss fans are upset." And I saw this CBS Sports headline and a bunch of other headlines that just said, Lane Kiffin is glad Ole Miss fans are upset. That ignores a heck of a lot of context to what he was saying, because no, he's not he's not glad that the fans are upset. What he's saying is this is the standard that he's brought into Oxford. Before Lane Kiffin showed up, no one in a million years expected Ole Miss to go into Death Valley and win. Frick, Alabama sometimes doesn't even expect that. But Ole Miss was expected to. They were favored for justifiable reasoning. I picked them. Kiffin's changed the standard. And Ole Miss, it's a hard loss. I won't deny that. But I will say there's a new standard in Oxford with Lane Kiffin there. And it's attainable that they can go in and beat Georgia.